going back to this diagram, we have to realize that Steiner speaks about, gives this diagram, but you have to relate it to your own body. So it's as if you are centered. So what's physical, that's the left. And what's etheric is from the right. Yeah? So it's not a diagram that is done as you are an onlooker, as if you are an onlooker. So this arrow, the sentient body, that comes towards you from the front. And then the sentient body comes from the back and goes into the world. So if you realize that you don't get mixed up with this thing. That's the trouble children have, that we have something in two-dimensional, which is flat, which represents something in three-dimensional. And this going into the front and going backwards, that's the will line, going into the will or withdrawal. So, and we see in our letters and so forth, that's often the problem. The going into the front and going to the back. So we face the same problem when we read diagrams. So as long as you are conscious that this is left, your left, and that is your right, then you are okay. And this is also a basis for extra lesson exercises. When Audrey describes them, you read them as if you're doing them yourself. So it's not that you're standing opposite someone, but you're doing them yourself. And how currents go and how directions are. It's that you're doing it yourself, because all the exercises help to anchor or to center yourself. So it's always described as you are here in the middle and there things are happening. From the left and from the right, from above and from below, and so forth. From front and back. So, this goes back to Steiner. Now, this is just a theoretical diagram, and from this diagram we can have the idea of the dimensions of space, above, below, left and right, and front and back. But it's also these forces are working and forming the body. And Steiner said in these lectures that every detailed organ we have can be described from the working together of these different forces. So like I said before, the senses we have, which are all in front of our body, they are imprinted by this current of the sentient body into our body. When you look at embryology, for instance, there are certain things which are interesting. For instance, when you look at in an embryology book, how the intestine, the system of the intestines are formed. There is in a very early stage, there is a tube which becomes the metabolic system, and they draw it like this. It's one tube in the beginning at a certain stage, but then from that tube, the whole metabolic system is produced. Now you hardly can imagine how that works, but I saw that drawn, and then you see that this tube is making I have to look it up because I want to be sure. At a certain stage it starts moving and folding. Is that a word? Do you understand what I mean? It moves and it folds like that. And here, this one is also, well, what's happening? It goes like that, and then I have to draw it correctly. Well, it goes this way, anyway, and then here in between there is something happening. And from here comes the stomach, and then here comes the intestines. Now what's happening, that they saw that there is a certain point, and there's another certain point, and these 2 points, they move. So first it is like that, and then you have here a movement and there a movement, and this one goes there, and that one goes there, and it's folded like that, and then brought into movement as if there are 2 forces that run into one another, and the whole process starts going to spiral, and then it becomes longer, and that's how it's folded, and all the organs come out of that. These forces run into one another, and in the embryo these forces are working and they develop, and from that the whole metabolic system is created and folded and moved. So when you see that, you can connect it with that. Another thing is, for instance, the heart. I write this out. In the beginning, blood flows and the heart is not there. That's interesting. That's something that scientists don't really have a solution for that. That blood is already floating, you call it floating, circulating, but there's no heartbeat. Because there's no heart. Well, there is something, an organ, there is an organ, but that's not completed yet. So there is something like this, and blood is running through it. But it's not, the chambers are not there. Do you call it the heart chambers? Yeah. The chambers are not there, but the blood is running. And it has a certain pulse already. And then gradually from the sides, it grows like that. And from the sides, the heart is divided into 4 chambers. As if these 4 forces work together. And that's just in the flat, because the others are also there, because you have also front and back in the heart. And then from these forces working together, in balance, that Steiner says, in balance, when they are all working in balance, then from that the heart is created. And he gives this picture of the Celtic cross. It's in the lecture. He gives this diagram. It's a Celtic cross that all these forces are worked together, evenly strong. And from that the heart is created. Now what is interesting is that when the heart is there, in our heart, there is a certain blood flow. And you must help me with the wording, because what's this? This is the chamber, and that is the atrium, or how do you call it? Atrium. Atrium. Now, when you picture the heart as being your own heart, not mine, but your own, so that you project your own heart here. When you see, then you have this atrium here on the left. Does the blood come in on the left? Yeah. Yeah.
Venus, the blue blood.
Yeah, the blue blood comes in, and it comes into this atrium, and it needs to go through here to go into this chamber. Ventricle. Into this ventricle. It needs to pass this gate. This opening valve, thank you. But because it needs to go there, it goes into a vortex movement. It starts spiraling. And what's interesting is that in here, it starts spiraling in this direction. It goes anti-clockwise, and then it goes down. Like you pull the plug in the tap or whatever, in the drain, yeah. So anti-clockwise it goes through, and then it comes in the chamber, and then it goes into the body. But down here it's reversed. So down here it spirals the other way. It goes clockwise on the left side of the heart. So you have this vortexing movement. Then it goes to the lungs, and then you get this oxidized blood. Is it called oxidized blood? Oxidized. It comes in here.
Oxygenated.
Oxygenated, what a word. Now those who know their diagrams can figure out what happens on the other side. But here it comes in and it starts spiraling and it goes clockwise. And down here in this, what was it? Chamber? Ventricle, thank you. It goes out into the body, to the aorta. And it goes in an anti-clockwise movement. That's happening in the heart, but that's happening in our limbs as well. In the movement system, we have the same picture. So we see that there is movement, and when there's movement, there is always this spiral tendency, because otherwise it doesn't come. It isn't possible. There's always movement above, below, left and right, and so forth. And there are certain patterns. And blood runs this way through the heart. In our arms, we use these same patterns. When we stand upright, when we walk, our feet always move inward, according to our hips.